Well, welcome again, and thank you for staying on. Let me first start by thanking Mrs. Cherie Blair for having this opportunity to chat with us. Welcome to the Mobile World Congress 2015.
Well, I'm delighted to be here again. I feel this is a regular fixture on my calendar, and each year it gets bigger and better, and more people are interested, not just in the latest flashy new gadget, which, by the way, I'm very interested in, but also in how we can use mobile for good.
Just to give you a little bit of perspective, the Cherie Blair Foundation was founded in 2008, and this was at the back of the realization that with the right support, women can be effective and movers in the economy and social activities in the markets that they live. With that in mind, Cherie, the foundation is mainly focused on women. And just a couple of questions. Why is your foundation focused on women necessarily? And secondly, why is it important for women to be economically empowered?
Well, first of all, it's focused on women because actually, if you want to make change in the world, then the biggest single change would be to empower women all over the world, because sadly, across the world, women still don't have equality with men. And unless we develop each and every person's potential, then all of us are being held back. So, Ernst & Young did a survey, and they said if you're looking at what is going to be the big contribution to the global economy in the 21st century, yes, China with its billions, yes, India with its billions, but actually it's women entering into the economy is as bigger, if not bigger, driver of the economy than either of those two huge markets. So women are a really vital part of our society and of the development of the world. But nowhere in the world are women actually achieving equality, not even in those places that everyone that always come top of the list, like the Scandinavian countries. But if you look at the World Economic Forum report, every year they do a global gender gap report, and the picture emerges, and it's been pretty similar for the last 5 years when it's been doing it. If you look, the gender gap is closing between men and women in relation to health and education, and that's a good thing. But if you then look at, if you like, where power sits in the world, which is economic activity and political activity, then the figures are much bleaker in relation to the differentiation between men and women. So in relation to economic empowerment, for example, you will have only 6 women for every 10 men. And for political power, it's more like 2 and a bit women for every 10 men. So at the rate we're going, it's going to take nearly a century before we reach gender parity for women in economic development, economic potential, economic opportunity. And that just doesn't make sense. But the other reason to invest in women is because actually they're such a good investment. And it quite often astonishes me that year in, year out, why do we keep having to have these surveys which keep telling people, but if you invest in a woman, she will put 90% of that investment back into her family and into the community, and the figures for men is a disappointing 30 to 40%. Why do we need to have programs which keep telling us that companies that have diversity on their boards, companies that have diversity amongst the management structure are the ones that are more successful, who make more money for the shareholders, and are the sort of companies that people want to work with? We keep coming out with all these figures, and yet we end up with this position where women still aren't getting their fair share. So I wanted to do something about that in the way I could. The other reason, of course, is simply a personal one, because as a young woman, I was brought up by my mother and my grandmother. and each of them had left school at 14. Each of them were fantastically talented women, but who didn't get the opportunities that I had. And they were determined that my sister and I would get the chances that they'd been denied. And as a result, I'm sitting here today, and I don't believe that I'm unique in that. There are plenty of women across the world that if we just gave them the opportunities, they would develop their talents in whatever way their talents take them. So let's do something about that. So that led me to think, okay, what can I do? Because education is important, health is important, but I felt that actually economic independence is a vital key. It mattered to me. It enabled me to do what I've been able to do in my life because I have the ability to make my own money and therefore to make my own choices. And I've seen too many women across the world whose choices have been narrowed because they haven't had that ability. So I wanted to concentrate on women's economic empowerment, and in particular as women as drivers of the economy, as drivers of development, women with their own small and growing businesses.
You talk about businesses. I'm looking at the women entrepreneurs, especially the small ones, that you are looking to grow into successful business women. And looking at technology itself, how do you see technology enabling women to access financial services, which to date has been a challenge to them?
Sure. Well, my foundation is now in its 6th year, and in those years we have managed to reach over 100,000 women in 70 different countries, and we've done that actually because of technology, and in particular in programs that involve using the mobile phone and the internet, because the internet is the poor person's access into the resources of the world, and mobile technology is the poor person's access to the internet. It's also, of course, absolutely clear that it's because of mobile technology that suddenly services that were just not economic to be given to those who we nicely call the bottom of the pyramid now suddenly become accessible, and that's what's so exciting. And I know because you were very much involved in M-Pesa in Kenya, which I've been to see. I mean, that was almost an accident waiting to happen. I don't suppose when you started they ever thought the impact that it would have in Kenya and then the wider world. But what it shows, of course, is that if you put these tools into the hands of resourceful people, it is absolutely amazing what they can do. So whether it's a program like we heard at the last session, which was about World Reader, helping young people with education and learning to read, or whether it's like a program that my foundation has done thanks to ExxonMobil Foundation, and we did it with at the time in 3 countries, and we call it the Business Women app, and the Business Women app is what I describe as a nano MBA for market women. It's a series of text messaging, because I so agreed with what was said at the last session, that if you're talking about access to the poor, text messaging, 2G is still very important because it's cheap and it's accessible. And we reached over 100,000 women in Nigeria, Indonesia and Tanzania. And by the way, 20,000 men. There were some men who were not too proud to take up a service that was called Business Women. And it was a series of hints and tips. So you get 5 text messages sent to you. So you didn't have to go and pull it down. It was delivered to you. And it was a program over a year that gave you basic business training, taught you the difference between capital and income, helped you know what the benefits were of becoming a formally recognized business, gave you hints and tips about how to build your confidence or how to improve your product. And it was a tremendous success. 90% of the users, when we had it assessed afterwards, said that they both learned something and used what they learned in their business from it, and 68% said it actually helped them get more business. So it was incredibly successful, but it was a free service. I mean, how many training programs can you get that you can deliver to over 100,000 people? You can do that because of the mobile phone.
I'm glad you spoke about mobile technology and training, because that was going to be my next question. But before that, I'd like to open it to the floor. If there are any questions, maybe I'll take one or two questions from the floor for Cherie.
Well, while we're waiting, let me talk about financial inclusion, because that was your question. I got sidetracked into training, but I think financial inclusion is also really, really important. And I think we've only just begun to touch the tip of the iceberg in relation to that. Obviously, mobile money is an important part of that. But mobile money in itself, of course, brings access to a much wider community, to the sort of financial services we take for granted. We're doing a project at the moment, thanks to Visa, in Nigeria, and we're training and working with 2,500 women agents there. And what we're doing with them, with our local partner, Youth Technology, is we're giving them business and technology training to enable them to operate as Visa money agents. And those 2,500 women Visa money agents are going to reach 75,000 people who haven't had those sorts of services before. So it's a win for the women who get a business and a way of supporting themselves, and it's a win for their neighbours who suddenly get access to the services that Visa can bring them. And we're doing that with First National Bank, is the banker that's sitting behind that. But and I was just talking, I know she's in the audience, Mrs. Zanele Mbeki is here, who of course is the former First Lady of South Africa and also equally trying to work for financial inclusion. It's not enough simply to say financial inclusion is mobile money. Financial inclusion is much more about providing the services for the poor that we take to granted. So yes, of course, some of it is mobile money, some of it is credit, but it's also insurance products. It's the vast range of services that you and I take for granted because we've got access to a bank account. And there's no reason now in the 21st century where we can't devise targeted services that are going to provide those sort of choices to the people at the bottom of the pyramid too. Why? Because what was once not economic, because the sums involved were too small and the infrastructure cost was too high, have now suddenly become economic because of technology.
Training is a key aspect of empowering these women in financial services and the women becoming successful entrepreneurs. You talked about the 2,500 women agents in Nigeria, plus the hundreds of thousands in other markets that you have been involved in. How has mobile technology enabled this training to the extent that it has become effective?
Well, what is interesting is in that Businesswomen app that we did, and which we want to take now and expand more widely, we did two things actually. We didn't know how many we were going to reach. So 100,000 in Nigeria alone is a lot of women. But did it make any difference giving them this information? Well, it appears from the Michigan Institute of Technology that looked and assessed what we did, that it can make a difference if the information is relevant and is targeted, and it actually is pitched at the right practical level so that people can see, oh, that's a good idea, I can try it. So let me take an example of just one of the women, for example, in Nigeria that afterwards we did some research on. She'd been a teacher, she was coming up for retirement, she'd always had a few chickens, you know, and she made a bit of a sideline selling eggs to her neighbours. But when she was going to retire, she was going to have to rely on that as her income. And she subscribed to the service, which was a free service, that we did some research which showed that actually, if it was worthwhile, people would be prepared to pay for it as well. And from that service, she learned a number of things. First of all, she told us, well, you know, I never really, even though I'm a teacher, I didn't really understand the difference in investing in back into your business, you know, the difference in income and capital. It taught me that. One of the hints and tips was about improving your product. And so she actually asked her customers and realized that it was the quality of the eggs that mattered. And so she started to give a little bit of vitamins to the chickens before they laid their eggs, and therefore her eggs got bigger and more consistent in size. And her business literally, you know, not just doubled and tripled, I mean, 10 times the growth in that business. And she'd learnt that by putting into practice information that had been fed down to her through the internet. At the same time, we did take a smaller group of women and gave them, in addition, targeted training, so additional one-to-one training to see, you know, how did that compare. And I think what was interesting is, of course, the more intensive training does make a difference. Mm-hmm. But of course, you can only do that with a small number of people. So we were quite surprised, I think, or pleasantly surprised, that actually you can achieve a lot even by doing this hints and tips. It's a start, obviously, and we need to work out how we can progress that further. You know, how can we take this service? We're looking now to take this service. We're going to start it soon in Mexico, and it'll be a version 2.0 because we're very techy. Mm-hmm. And version 2.0 is going to be bigger and better, and we're going to try a little bit of gaming in it and videos, and just to try and make this product even more successful. Mm-hmm. But we couldn't do that, of course, without our partners, because we do nothing without partners. So we partnered with an international institution to get the information right. We made sure it was targeted specifically at the different countries. We did it in the local languages, really, really important. And then, of course, we had our mobile operator partners who provided us the service for free on their networks. So there is so much that we can do together. We can really reach people that previously have been neglected, not because we haven't wanted to, mm-hmm. but because we just haven't had the means to.
So what I hear from you is that mobile technology bundled with the right kind of information and an intensive training curriculum does make successful training programs.
And of course, the heart of this, you know, is the people. It's the end user that makes all the difference. And that's another reason why you should invest in women, actually, because women, you know, really tend to be conscientious. They really care. They care often because they are the carers, and therefore, when they are wanting to make a bit of more money, when they're wanting to progress their business to the next stage, it's because they're not just doing it for themselves, they're doing it for their families. And we also found, and we did some research in this respect in the Middle East about women in the supply chain, in the mobile supply chain. And we found that actually in the Middle East, not only were the women sellers of mobile services very good at what they did, not only were they trusted and able to reach other women, which aren't always accessible to the males, but actually the men in those countries tended to trust the women as well, because they had in general a reputation for being more reliable, more honest. Mm-hmm. So this is an industry that absolutely should be run by and dominated by women. So.
I'm afraid...
That's going to happen. That's going to happen next year, obviously.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm afraid we don't have time to take many questions. Maybe just one quick one. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Lucas Laris. I'm a reporter working for Technology Review. You've discussed how you can make a difference once you get these programs, these applications, these questions, these messages into the hands of women. What can you do, what can many people do to get mobiles and handsets into the hands of women in male-dominated societies where they are already at a disadvantage?
Well, you touch on a point. 5 years, I think it is 5 years ago, my foundation jointly funded with the GSMA the first report into whether there was a global gender gap in access to mobile phones, and I know that that research has been updated, and that's going to be launched on Wednesday. I'm very excited about that and really looking forward to seeing the results. But obviously we can't talk about those results till Wednesday. But that report did show that there was some, did identify some of the difficulties. And some of the difficulties are cultural. There's no doubt about that at all. In some societies, there's a fear of allowing women to gain access to mobile phones because of the independence it might bring for them. I remember a few years back, someone a tribal leader in northern Pakistan telling parents not to allow their daughters to have a mobile phone because it could allow her to speak to boys. Many mobile phone operators have found ways round that by stressing the fact that mobiles are also ways of keeping your family safe. And that's worked very well, for example, with Roshana in Afghanistan, and Orido as well have done products, I know, where they focus on giving positive messages to educate the men as to why actually it is a good thing to allow your females to have access to the mobile phone. Then sometimes it's to do with the fact that women themselves don't even know that a mobile is something that would be useful to them. So it's partly to do with ignorance, because they haven't got one, and if you haven't ever used one, why would you know what opportunities it has? So part of it's about education, about how we would encourage people to understand that mobile is a great tool. Part of it is, of course, about some people are frightened of technology. I know my own mother is not exactly, she's still very hesitant about switching on the mobile phone, in case I don't quite know but whatever it is, in case it sort of explodes in her hand. And so you do find, if you look at the profile, that perhaps more older women may find it a little bit more confusing than younger women who are more keen. So that there are all sorts of factors that go into this. And it's by sort of research that the GSMA has done and has renewed that we can see what these factors are, and there are ways around them, and I know many mobile operators are looking at that, not least because in that first report we identified, was it 300,000 women across the world who could have access that didn't, 300 million, yeah, not 1,000, that's not a lot. No, in mobile we're talking millions, yeah. And a $13 billion opportunity lost if the mobile operators don't reach these potential customers. And those figures, I know, will probably be updated shortly.
Yep. Well, I'm afraid we've run out of time, but Cherie, thank you very much for finding time to speak to us, and to the audience for being here. Please help me in appreciating Cherie Blair for being here.